Hello, fools. I'm Motley Fool's senior analyst and lead advisor Asit Sharma, and my guest today is Michael Murray, CEO of Kopin Corporation, symbol KOPN. Kopin designs and manufactures small form factor visual displays used primarily in the defense, medical, and industrial industries. Kopin is a microcap company. It has a market capitalization that's approaching $400 million. After a transformative 2025, revenue growth is expected to accelerate to roughly the 20 to 30% compounded annual growth rate range. Michael has been CEO since 2022, and he's an engineer by training. Michael Murray, welcome to the Motley Fool.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners and readers.
Well, we're excited for this conversation. And I wanted to start off with an overview of Kopin and its products. It's a relatively small company that some of our members and listeners may not be as familiar with. So could you give us an overview, maybe of the company's history and the evolution of its products?
Sure. So firstly, Kopin is actually a 40-year-old company that started out of MIT by the founder, Dr. Theon. The company started building hybrid bipolar transistors, actually, and evolved into building microdisplays a few decades ago. And essentially, the company has its second CEO, which is me. I joined in 2022, as you stated correctly. We're in our third year of our transformation plan, which is really to focus in on creating true value for our customers in terms of taking those microdisplays, which are basically tiny TVs the size of your fingernail, and creating a much richer application-specific solution from them. Of course, we currently do sell microdisplays to folks that use them in heads-up displays, as an example, or applications like AR visual systems or goggles. But we're really going up the stack in terms of adding more value to our customers, and that includes optics, drive electronics, and in some cases software. We're moving on from there into new applications like bidirectional microdisplays, which is really exciting, not only for us, but certainly the industry and the AR application space.
So moving from maybe more components to selling solutions, and
Exactly.
I would follow that up with asking, what are your core products and what represents the most opportunity as you look forward? And then we'll get into maybe some end markets, and that will further illustrate where you all have a competitive edge.
You bet. So right now, Kopin's very unique in the industry. Firstly, we're based here in the United States, which is a big factor specifically for our largest market space, which is defense. Secondly, we're the only company that builds 4 different types of microdisplays. So we build our proprietary LCD technology right here in Westborough, Massachusetts. We also build OLED technology, which we removed our focus out of China when I joined, and we now have US DoD and European sources of supply for our OLED technology. We've also got liquid crystalline silicon, which is a very high refresh rate technology out of Dalgety Bay, Scotland, which is great technology for things like automotive, and as well as first-person viewer goggles because of the refresh rate. And then lastly, we've been awarded a very large contract by the Secretary of War in the U.S. Department of Defense to build a sovereign-based color micro-LED. And micro-LEDs, if folks don't know, are the vanguard of display technology. They are 100 times more bright than a OLED device, better contrast for the same amount of power consumption, relatively speaking, which is why folks like Apple and Meta have spent billions of dollars trying to create this technology. Kopin is actually shipping today a monochrome micro LED into an aircraft application in defense. So we have this capability. The United States government just put their seal of approval on Kopin to bring this capability to the United States. That puts us in a very unique position. And lastly, we now have this bidirectional capability, which now provides the human in the loop and creates data based off of your physical responses to the picture that we're showing you in terms of brightness and contrast, and also how you as a human being react to your external stimulus. So there's also a lot of work being done with micro LEDs and how to transfer not just pictures, but also data. And that's been a fairly large push for the company over the course of the last couple of years since I joined.
So potentially opening up a new market for you. And for the layperson, what does color bring? Why color?
Great question. So one of the things I do when I talk to investors, I'll ask them at the beginning to remember a square is good, a triangle is I don't know, and a circle is bad. So when I go through the conversation, I'll come back to this at the end and ask you which was the triangle or which was the circle. And most people will get it somewhat right. A lot of people actually get it wrong. But the reason why color is so important is the human brain can remember green is good. Yellow, don't remember, not sure. Red is bad. So when you're getting shot at, as an example, you don't want to necessarily remember, was the square good or was it bad? Was the circle good or was it bad? What you want to know is green is good, red is bad. Fire at red, don't fire at asset who's green, or run right, which is green, don't run left, which is red. So our human brains can react to color much more efficiently and effectively. Moreover, color actually provides us the ability to give really rich thermal information and telemetry information to a warfighter or a driver, as an example of a vehicle, and certainly to a surgeon that's actively operating on a human being. So color is tremendously important just because of how our human brains work.
Mm. And moving on to the markets,
Mm-hmm.
outside of defense, where's the company focused?
Yeah, so maybe if it's okay, I'll actually start with defense because there's
Sure.
something that's non-obvious to investors, in my view, around defense. Defense is a very lumpy industry, right? And it's perturbed by government shutdowns or contracts that get canceled because of geopolitical issues. It's very, very tumultuous in some cases. So for us, we need to become much more stable in our defense industry. And that's why our push into Europe was so important last year. And we'll get to how we did that and accomplished that in 2025. So now we have a tremendous European business that's growing and our US military business, which is also growing. So that together is already much more stable, right? So let's take that one leg of the stool away for a second. The second leg of our business is in medical. And we've been partnered with a company called HMDmd. They are focused on delivering our technology to the market, which is the CR3 headset, which Kopin designed, built, and is delivering to HMDmd. And they've signed two major OEMs in Europe. One of them is now public, and that is Carl Zeiss. The second one will be made public very soon, but they're 1 and 2 in the industry. And this is a medical headset that offers the surgeon a 3D view of what they're operating on and sits on the bridge of their nose so that when they look down at the patient, being you, they can still look with their own 2 eyes and just look up like I'm doing here to see the 3D rendering of the information that they're getting, as opposed to looking up at a display that's sitting on the wall. And what we solve there is very important. When you drive a vehicle and you look and check your blind spot, see what happens with my hands? Mm-hmm. Your hands always follow your head. And that's what we're solving. And this technology is really adding value, not only to the surgeon, but obviously to the patients because they're having better outcomes. And it's great technology. So that's the second leg of the stool. The third leg, to really balance Kopin out, is the industrial and automotive area. We have some great technology in this area. We're choosing certain markets and certain customers and partners in this area actively. I think over the course of the next 6 months or so, you're going to see some major announcements from Kopin with some major new players in the industrial and automotive industries taking some new technology to market this year. So that's the third part of our stability program, which is really catching wind as we speak.
Okay, so speaking of announcements, you had a bunch of them in 2025. If we
Yeah.
had this conversation in February of 2025, it would have looked a lot different than it's going to look in the next 20 minutes or so in this interview. So can you tell us how the business transformed and a little bit about the partnerships that you embarked on and some of the deals that you struck in, I would say, mid-2025 forward?
Yeah, 2025 was a bit of a blur. We were very busy, and the good news is that we have expanded our customer base exponentially and globally. And that was, as I said earlier, a big push for myself and the team to get global, get more stable in our business. and also work with customers that are market makers. And market making customers are the ones that lead one or two in their industry. That's really our strategy and focus. No matter what market I pick, I want one and two. I want the number one person that's making the market, and then the fast follower that's following them. And we want to be able to hedge our bets against those markets. So as an example, in Europe, when you think about NATO or Ukraine, you can only think about one name, and that's Theon. Theon owns about 60% of the night vision goggle and thermal weapon sight market for NATO actively today. And I think around number two, they kind of ebb and flow between them, between these two companies is Elbit and Theon. So we have great relationships with both companies. When I spoke with Christian, who was building a wonderful company out of Greece, we saw the same opportunities to partner together on our MicroLED technology in Europe. Moreover, help them get further access to better technology like our OLED capability and MicroLED capability for their night vision goggles, for their thermal weapon sights, and as well as add more value to their $1 billion order, which they just were awarded for night vision goggles for NATO, where our DarkWAVE strategy comes into play. DarkWAVE is an attachment to their night vision goggles, and we're currently adapting that technology for them to sell with their night vision goggle capability to NATO. So
what capability does it bring, by the way? You attach it to the goggles and...
Yeah, great question. So the current version that they are adapting to their night vision goggle will add color, and it has a thermal channel that can be added. So to a standard night vision goggle, you're basically able to see at night, but only green, right? With this attachment, it actually allows you telemetry data from an ATAC system, which you're currently wearing, and NATO has its own version of that. So we take telemetry data, meaning us at move right or move left, your landing zone is 300 meters to the left type of information. But we add color to that. We talked about why color was so important, but also thermal capabilities at night is really important. One of the things we learned in Israel and Gaza is that thermal imaging with night vision goggles is tremendously important, especially for folks in tunnels, as an example, that might be hiding behind a tarp or a board or what have you. Having that thermal channel capability will allow the weapon fighter to see if there was someone thermally there and how long ago they may or may not have been there. So those three things are options that Theon is currently absorbing right now, and that capability will allow them to sell this technology with their night vision goggles.
And that's not the only type of vertical that you expanded in last year. You also made a lot of progress in the drone industry. So could you please tell us about the partnerships you have there and the type of equipment that you're supplying to the drone industry?
You bet. So very quickly after we announced our deal with Theon, we did another deal with Theon as well, which was a $41 million PIPE transaction that we also had two other strategic investors, being Unusual Machines, which is a fantastic drone company. Alan Evans and his company have done wonderful things here in the United States and globally. And then Eric, who runs Ondas. Those two folks we know very well. They're very big supporters of Kopin. And one of the things that I really like about Eric's vision at Ondas is how to bring all of these US companies together to solve very large geopolitical problems and issues. And one of those issues is, how can we as three companies or four companies work together to bring more US-based content into first-person viewer drone goggles, as an example. So before the US DoD mandated that no Chinese displays were allowed in first-person viewer goggles, we knew that was coming. And the three of us basically decided that Kopin can lead some of that. We're able to remove their displays that they currently buy from wherever they currently buy them, and add our displays, whether it be LCD, OLED, MicroLED in the future, along with our bespoke optics. And now you have a US DoD sovereign manufactured first-person viewer goggle that you can sell to the United States Department of Defense. And that was the reason, I think, that they chose to invest in Kopin. And we're close to announcing several deals in the first-person viewer drone industry. And we already have some of this technology. Our DAVAS strategy is a first-person viewer, meaning it swings down and you can actually see ATAC data to your eye while you still have your sights on your rifle. DarkWAVE, as an example, will provide data through your night vision goggle from a drone, so that you can see that data. You can't control it, but you can see it. And then certainly adding our capability to first-person viewer drones and the goggles that ship with them. That's really the focus for this year. And we have some very exciting orders that I think we'll announce in the next quarter or two. And we should see revenue from those in Q3 and Q4. And that's the reason for the investment in the partnership. And I think it's going very well so far.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up there. I've been reading stats about sort of the catch-up game that the U.S. is going to play in terms of manufacturing drones domestically.
Yes.
And I think it might have been from your filings that China has the capacity to output 8 million drones a year. Second and third, probably Russia and Ukraine, because they become experts at drone warfare. So to get to the scale that the United States needs to in order to be self-sufficient in this regard, what does it mean for a company of your size? Do you have the manufacturing supply in place and the relationships when this begins to seriously scale? And can you benefit from that? Or will you need to draw in partners or perhaps find creative ways to be able to supply the demands of the contracts that you might be able to garner?
Great question. So there's two pieces to that. And I'll start off with the piece that's most urgently required from my perspective, which is that capacity, whether it be for LCD or OLED or MicroLED in the future. And Kopin, thankfully, has the capacity to be able to build that here in Westboro or in Dalgety Bay. Unfortunately, it's the reason why we weren't profitable next year, is our absorption rate of our foundries isn't high enough. Now, we've done a wonderful job, I think, of reducing our SG&A and our OpEx year over year. You can see it digitally come down in terms of OpEx spend, and our quality has digitally come up, because those are the big levers that we have in the defense industry to improve profitability. So now that our OpEx is at a relatively sustainable level, our SG&A is at a sustainable level, our quality is at the highest level it's ever been as a company. Now to get profitable, you need more revenue to absorb the costs of your foundry. So that's the good news. We're going to get more revenue from first-person viewers and selling more of what we have. And I don't need to add any CapEx to this building or Dalgety Bay or our Reston, Virginia facility. We have the capacity to build this. Moreover, our partners that we buy our digital ASICs or backplane from, they have a significant amount of capacity. And the US government has now invested in Kopin to add more capability and production for micro-LED here in the United States. And we're able to do that and utilize those production lines effectively. So no issues or worries about capacity or rare earth. We're not subject to that, thankfully. And how we developed our backplane architectures, we can go to multiple vendors for the same topology and geometry. So we're good there. Where the US government realized that they were woefully behind is in some of the display architectures and technologies like micro-LED. And a lot of readers and viewers and listeners won't understand why that's important. I just want to pause on this for a second. The reason why micro-LEDs are so important to the United States is that if you're able to see your adversary before they see you, you're more likely to come home. If you're more likely to come home because you can see your adversary, you can actually adjudicate whether or not that adversary is something that you want to engage in or not. That will save lives. OLED is very good at many things. Micro-LED is the best at contrast, brightness, and clarity, and the pixel size is very, very small. So that means you can get a much bigger display with more pixels, coupled with a much bigger camera with smaller pixels, and now you can see your adversary farther away than anybody else. Now that's critical. Unfortunately, China pivoted 2 years ago from spending billions of dollars in OLED technology. They pivoted towards micro-LEDs, and now they have those micro-LEDs in production, and Russia has them in their night vision goggles, and they have them in their thermal weapon sights, and they certainly have them in their aircraft. So therefore, they can see us before we see them, and that's not a good place to be. Therefore, the Secretary of War invested $15.4 million in Kopin and asked us to build a sovereign color micro-LED capability, and that's what we're up to right now. Now, that capability will go into multiple programs. like soldier-borne systems, thermal weapon sights, night vision goggles. We'll have a full portfolio of displays for heads-up displays and helmets in aircraft, which we're already working on, and have a monochrome version, which is very different for a different application. But that will be the franchise that we grow quickly.
Thanks for illustrating that. That makes it a lot clearer, the importance of the technology. I have a brief follow-up. So drawing this all together, looking at your walkthrough of absorption in your plant to bring this to a layperson level, about or at which point is your utilization profitable for you? In other words, what is your break-even point in your factories? If it's 50% utilized, 70% utilized, then we start to see profits on the bottom line. And the second part of the question is, long-term, what should your operating margins look like if you had all the revenue that you project come home?
Yeah, so I'll take the last one first. Because we're sole sourced in many applications in the United States, we have to follow what's called TINA regulations, which is Trust in Negotiations Act. That limits our upper gross margins to around 45% if we're sole sourced, which we are in most applications, because the technology that we bring to bear is very, very difficult to produce. But overall gross margins, we want to be in that 35 to 45 points of gross margin size. It really depends on the mix. Medical is higher than that, as an example. Our funded research and development is higher than that. So it really depends on the quarter and what the mix is, whether it's funded research and development or product. Our product margins historically have been very poor because of our quality. Now that we've fixed our quality issues and we're hitting that quality level consistently the last 3 quarters, they've been creeping up into the mid-30s, which is where they really need to be. So we're confident that that 35 to 45% gross margin range is achievable for US and European defense as a business for our sole source business. Funded research and development, a little bit higher, so it really depends on the mix. Now, the mix is interesting because the question you ask is, what about your foundry and how does that work? That's all product, right? Funded research and development, which is our major line items that we have right now, that doesn't equate to anything in the foundry. It doesn't absorb those costs other than the engineers.
Yeah, we're going to assume you have a long-term payoff from those expenses on your P&L.
Exactly, and that will show up in production of new products, et cetera. So this year is really interesting because we have a number of programs coming out of funded research and development, like the Abrams PPAP program that we've been working on all along, and we're not sure where that's going exactly with Abrams, but we also have a number of other programs that are coming out of funded research and development that will then go into production and absorb those costs of the foundry, if that makes sense. So to say it differently, I would give your audience this. It's from a revenue perspective, around 15.5 million to 16 million is what we need to hit per quarter of revenue, whatever the mix might be, to be profitable or at least break even. And I think we have that in us this year. I'm saying it's next year, but I think if the tailwinds do hit us and first-person viewers and Europe continues to grow like it is right now, and we do get a little bit more order book activity that we are expecting that was delayed because of the government shutdowns. If we do get those orders in time, we could hit those levels in Q3 or Q4 this year. But for conservatism, we've been saying next year.
Great. And you have a healthier balance sheet to boot.
We do.
It appears that you raised some capital last year, a stock offering, and I didn't see any long-term debt on the books. So well-resourced moving forward.
Exactly right. So the company has no debt, no warrants on the balance sheet. Our top 3 holders remain our top 3 holders, and they are the best in the industry. We have been getting much more institutional ownership lately. I've been working really hard with institutional investors so that we can lock down some of our top portfolio investors. We haven't announced Q4 yet, so I'll be a little hand wavy on how much cash we're sitting on. But if you do the math, we had 27 million at the end of Q3. We added 15 million to that, and another $41 million to that. And we should be sitting around 70 million of cash. 23 of that is in reserve for a bond on a longstanding litigation, which is going to federal appeal as we speak. And that's a decade-old litigation. So we think that's behind us from a standpoint of risk. The cash is on the balance sheet. It's bonded. and we move on. And we've got a great cash position, and we've got a great use of proceeds focused around color micro LED, around bidirectional micro displays, and our application specific solutions in Europe and here in the United States, and growing our medical business, and soon to be our industrial and automotive business, which we're very excited about some of the innovations that you're going to see from us this year, hopefully. But they're still pretty risky at this time.
Cool. Well, speaking of risks, let's move on to one that I wanted to make sure that we cover. You have a customer concentration, and this isn't unusual in companies of your size that are trying to embark on the next stage of growth. But I think checking your disclosures, this customer last year or last closed year was responsible for more than 60% of revenue. And how do you think about that in terms of growth? What's your projection? Does that remain a significant concentration? Is that going to even out as you embark on these newer partnerships in the future?
Yeah, so we have a great relationship with our top customers. The good news is that concentration will come down for the right reasons, meaning we're actually going to outgrow in some areas our current top customer, meaning we're going to be adding more to the balance sheet with new customer activity. As an example, we recently won a nice deal with Aero Environment, Blue Halo. The work that we're doing with Theon is going to add to that, and certainly some new orders that we just announced for Europe. And I think that's going to take that concentration of that one customer down naturally, as opposed to anything that could be negatively associated with it. So it's a concern, and that's why growing Europe was so important. Also growing that second leg of our stool here, which is the medical business, and then the industrial and automotive business that will start adding to that. So that will help us be a lot more sustainable and reduce and retire that risk.
I want to ask one more question about technical depth before we wrap up here. Caught my eye. So not only do you all have a proficiency in these visual systems, but you also design and manufacture application-specific integrated circuits. So this is sort of rare for a company that's in the optical business. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Where your ASICs find their home? Is it the automotive industry, maybe? Go ahead.
Yeah. It's a very interesting time. I'm grinning because we've been working on a few things since I joined here, and one of them is getting very close to hopefully being announced. But essentially, a microdisplay has really three parts to it. It has a digital ASIC, which controls the picture and controls the inputs and outputs and the communication and the power. So that digital ASIC we designed here at Kopin, and that's really what we do well. We're actually semiconductor.
Right. It's not off the shelf stuff here.
It's not off this. Unfortunately, it's not off the shelf. So that customization is what we get paid for. And that's a digital ASIC, which we could then produce at a foundry like TSMC or UMC or Global or Tower, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very much a digital process that's very well known in the industry. And we'll farm out the actual manufacturing of that to one of those companies for cost. But the design is done by Kopin. So that's one.
Okay.
Two, there's also an interface layer that gets created as well. And there's some more chemistry that goes along with that. There's process technology that goes along with that. And then there's the deposition of whatever material will actually make the display out of it, whether it be LCD, LCOS, OLED, or now micro LED. And we'll do that deposition here in the United States, which is really, really rare. Now, if you take all of those things together, that's a tremendous amount of capability, okay? That is who we are. We're a semiconductor developer. Now, that's not what our customers ask us for, unfortunately. When you go into lens crafters, as an example, you go in with a prescription and you get lenses, but you don't walk out with lenses. You walk out with a full set of eyeglasses, the frames, the eyepiece, it's molded to your face, et cetera. That's what our customers want. Like Lockheed Martin in the next generation short-range interceptor, they didn't want to buy a microdisplay. They want a full eyepiece from Kopin that screws in or bolts onto the launcher of a Stinger missile, because Lockheed doesn't want to necessarily get smart about how to build a microdisplay or the optics that go along with it, and then let alone do it all in a clean room, because that is the key. We have to build all of this technology in a clean room environment, because even a speck of a skin cell that gets involved in the microdisplay between the optics because it's magnified so much, you can actually see that little piece of skin cell, and it looks like a giant boulder in the vision system. So it's very hard technology to build. And then adding the ability to have bidirectional capability, whether it be physical assets or data, that's also a tremendous amount of sensing capability that the company has internally. And in my background, I bring that to the company as well. So lots to do. The company has over 200 patents. 6 of them are on AI generative microdisplays. We're the only company in the world that has an AI generative microdisplay that actually infers what's going to happen, whether it be physical data or ones and zero data. And that's a big investment that we put in called Neural Display. We started that development about 2 years ago.
That resides on the set. In other words, this is must be a very small NLP type device. Can you just explain it? I'm trying to conceptualize what I'm hearing.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, let's start with the problem we're solving. So as pilots or weapon fighters or even gamers, spatial computing device users, as an example, we learned this with Apple, is that when you watch a movie, you, the physical being, actually goes through emotional responses. So as an example, if you get scared, your pupils dilate at a very high rate. Well, the tiny little microdisplay that's sitting an inch away from your eye has no idea that you, the physical person, has changed, okay? So you can't just take it off and then readjust the brightness and contrast, put it back on, and then continue to watch your movie. That's a bad experience. Moreover, with the previous IVAS contract with the Army, that caused nausea and it caused some other issues. So what we've done is put in place a photo detect pixel in our microdisplay that only looks for white, gray, and black of the user's eyes. It doesn't take a picture. It basically uses the reflection of your eye to understand how big your pupil is getting. And then dynamically using a small AI generator in our backplane, our active backplane, we're basically tuning the microdisplay brightness and contrast so that you, the user, don't necessarily feel uncomfortable. Because once you feel uncomfortable, you take your visor that you're flying with and flip it up, or you take your IVAS system and throw it on the ground and fight with your own 2 eyes, or you take your spatial computing device that you're playing a game on or watching a movie and you move it up and your eyes hurt. They fundamentally hurt. That's a problem with the adoption rate of AR and VR. It's a huge issue. Mm-hmm. And this technology attempts to solve it. Neural display really needs to be a micro LED structure, and I've said that all along. It's currently OLED, and it's just not bright enough. So we'll be adapting that into a micro LED structure for potentially a couple of AR, VR major companies that are interested in working with us on that, as well as defense. But that bidirectional capability acts more like a transceiver at that point. So now we're thinking about how can we use that in different ways, because the speeds that we're able to process this capability and image and or data is very, very fast. And we have many, many channels. As an example, in our 2K by 2K microdisplay, we have 16 million pixels in that device. 16 million. That could be a lot of data or a big picture that you can show. But if you're able to receive data and or pictures at the same time, then it becomes a subsystem. And that's really what we're going for here, because being a commodity microdisplay company that sells against Sony, Samsung, and LG, not a good place to be here in the United States. But having that capability and being the best in the world at it and providing more capability to our customers is really what they want to pay for.
Yeah, I think you painted a picture of asking questions, what needs to be done to improve products, especially in these critical spaces. And the way that you approach them is fascinating. So I think you've really nicely described for us how you've made this leap from being that component supplier to a business that is providing solutions to some really great companies, really great customers. So as we wrap up here, question that I often ask, tell us a little bit about the culture at Kopin. What's it like? What's it like at the top? What's it like for someone who's the lowest paid employee?
Yeah, so I like to think and believe the culture that I bring, I learned at a company called Analog Devices. They treated me very well, with respect. They treat their engineers very, very well. They're a very innovative company. And that's what we are here. We're very respectful. The best idea wins. We're all engineers, and we want to solve the world's toughest problems and have some fun doing it. We're all big pet lovers here. We're big sports lovers here. I'm a big hockey fan and a big dog fan. And my startup that I had when I was building cryptography, we were able to bring our dogs to work as an example. Can't do that in a clean room environment. So we have our pet wall of fame where you can put up your pictures of your pets. And in the summertime, we have pizza trucks that comes in, every Wednesday. So this is a very engineering cultured business. And Dr. Fan started with that. I think we've taken it in a bit of a different direction. I think we're a lot more creative. We're a lot more fun. We try to understand why we want to do this and why we could help a company change their customers' view of their technology. Meaning, okay, if we work with HMDMD and Carl Zeiss, how will the surgeon provide a better outcome to you, the patient, when they're operating on your brain, right? If we can really add value to that and solve some of the problems along the way, the stickiness of our solutions, the value of what we do goes up. And that is the biggest key that I want your readers, listeners, and viewers to take away is we're not solving commodity problems. Anyone can buy a microdisplay, okay? But the thing is, we're solving very specific problems in these individual markets that nobody else can solve. And that's what we're going to get paid for. And that's how we become much more stable and consistent in our revenue. And that's going to take time. I was actually only CEO for 2.5 years. Dr. Fan was CEO into 2023. And we're really only attempting our third year of this turnaround. And I'm absolutely pleased with our progress thus far. But that's what's different about Kopin and our culture is we're looking at how to solve our customer's customer problem. And when you do that, you become an extension of your customer. And when you're an extension of your customer, they value you and you're less likely to be commoditized. At least that's the theory.
You mentioned creativity, and it strikes me that your company is a great mix of very nerdy engineering mindset and a lot of creativity.
Yeah, I think it's the creativity, right? And I think people need to be, as engineers, not rewarded for failures or rewarded for trying something new, but recognized that you took the initiative to try something that no one else has tried. And that's not rewarded, it's celebrated. And there's a difference in what I just said. And you have to learn from some of these mistakes that we make as learning. And if you do that as an engineer, you're going to learn very quickly about what works and what doesn't work. Be innovative, be creative. And when you are, your job is that much more fun. And when it's more fun, your customers have more fun. And when you solve their problems, hopefully revenue follows. But that's really all we can do, right? That's what we have control over. And I think the culture here has changed a lot. I think our customers are rewarding us for it. And we're adding new customers daily. And these are some of the biggest names in the industry. Ondas, Theon, Unusual Machines, Aero Environment, Blue Halo, Wilcox, Collins Aerospace, Lockheed Martin. These are, we're working with Anduril on a number of programs. So these are some of the toughest companies in the world to work with. And they recognize that we know what we're doing and we're very good at delivering it now. And that's been a big change in the last couple of years.
Michael Murray, I've so much enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you for your time. It's been very illuminating, and I'm glad we got a chance to learn about Kopin and all the amazing things that this company is trying to achieve in its markets.
Well, thank you, and I really appreciate your time, and I read a lot of your work, and I really appreciate you taking time with us today.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.